Human Forestry Podcast. And joining me, as always, is my good, trusted partner and friend, Tony Tressall. Hey, Tony, how's it going today?
Good day, everyone.
You know, this is a first for Tree Actions because we've officially crossed the pond, as they say. And coming to us on this session all the way from, I believe, Basel, Switzerland. I believe you're at home, Mark. Is Mark Bridge. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
It's not quite the first time, Dwayne. We did have Kristen on.
Kristen.
Well, she'll be on
right.
soon.
We had Kristen from Norway on. I forgot. Oh, man. I always do that. I always mess up. Well,
that's all right.
Our
acceptance.
All right. Well, you can correct it. You can edit that out, that part. That's the beauty.
No, I'm leaving it in.
Not doing this live is that way.
Well, Kristen's very forgiving. I'm sure she'll. I'm sure she'll be.
She's
lenient.
Amazing. I found what she's doing quite fascinating. You know, you think just when you think everybody's done it all, no one had ever identified roots like that. You know, like unreal.
Yeah, she spoke at Augsburg. That was very interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Enjoyed listening to her.
Yeah, likewise. I saw her in February in Ontario, and she's getting around.
Oh, that's right.
Well, we start every session with a simple question, and we kind of let it roll from there. And that the question is, if you could share with us, if you think back to the first time that you remember having a connection or feeling a connection to trees or a tree.
Interesting. I think there's different levels of connection. You know, I remember, you know, as kids, we were out and about a lot. You know, climbing trees is obviously something that we all did. That's a connection. I remember, you know, during school, we had the family house. There was a birch in the backyard, and I when I started tree work, I would not have been able to tell you that it was a birch, which is pretty humiliating. That I was not at that point in time, obviously not very connected. I was dazed and confused, and I was like, "Yeah, tree work, whatever." And it kind of took off from there. So I can't offer anything very deep, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's okay.
But it's kind of, you know, they have been a constant, and you know, I was thinking about it today. Is, you know, you know, when you, as you get older and you look back at your life, to realize, well, you know, trees have really been a red thread through my professional life, certainly. So I feel very indebted and humbled.
Absolutely. I feel similarly about trees. How, yeah, I like that. I've never heard anyone describe it quite like that, but the indebted and humbled part. You said you had a tree you climbed as kids. So how old and what kind of, that was the birch you were talking about then?
No, there was just in the neighborhood. There was, you know, I can't remember. There's again, yeah, I'm going to say it was horse chestnuts,
right?
Because they're good to climb. But having said that, you know, in your professional life, it's like trees in many ways. I'm not going to anthropomorphize trees, but you know, some trees are beautiful and elegant, and some trees are just. Can I cuss on this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
They're just assholes, you know. Some trees you rock up to, no, dude, we are not going to get on. like Ashley Maples, you know, I'm like, okay, we're off on bad footing from get-go. Yeah. Alan Mitchell in his tree ID book goes, he has, you know, he categorizes trees, and then there's X, fell on sight, Ashley's Maple, and I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. That is very true. I know when we started training out in Ontario, we were at this one park and they said, well, which trees? Well, any poplar, any of the cottonwoods, like you don't even have to ask. And these are big, healthy trees. It's like, no, if it's a cottonwood, you can cut it. and out where I'm from, you know, they're one of the bigger trees that we can actually grow. So it was just an interesting take on how, well, even some trees will be, you know, listed as noxious weeds, you know, in some places.
Well, I have to say that what I've found very interesting this year is, Tony, you were saying that it's been very dry and hot your end. Switzerland Germany, Central Europe has been very, very wet this year. After long periods of drought, the last 10, 15 years. And it is extraordinary how one season of constant precipitation has had a really profound effect on trees. Trees that were doing really badly, species that were doing badly, all of a sudden, they're looking much healthier this year. It just takes so little, and just makes you realize. I work mainly in urban environments. It just makes you realize what we put trees through in terms of the way we're changing the environment in cities. With lowering water tables, with construction, radiation coming off buildings, and so on and so forth. So it's something that's really been preoccupying me. Is we say trees are the solution. Trees are part of mitigation strategies for climate change, but I've been increasingly worried that the change is too rapid and too profound. But then the insight from this year has been actually it doesn't take a lot. A bit of rain over a period of time makes a huge difference.
Do you think the urban environment has a similar effect on people?
I've always lived in I've lived in town in town all my life. I enjoy living in town. Basel is 250,000 people, 200,000 people. It's not a big place. It's right on the border with France and Germany, so it's very international. There's a big expat community from the chemical industries who have their headquarters here. But for instance, it allows me to work locally. So a lot of the work we do with cargo bikes and trailers. So it doesn't involve getting in a car every day. I do believe in short, keeping distances as short as possible, keeping commutes as short as possible, working locally. I think those are all good things, and I think again they're going to be part of a solution longer term. I think we have to rethink mobility. I mean, over the years with True Imagineers, I did a lot of travel, and I just really decided to cut back on that because I always said to myself, "There's a reason I'm doing this. I'm flying somewhere. I'm talking about safety. I'm making and if somebody doesn't kill themselves or fall out of a tree, it justifies the carbon footprint that I generate by flying there." But there came a point during COVID actually where I was like, actually, do you know what? I think each of us has an individual accountability, regardless of why you're going, whether it's to spend a day on the beach in Cancun or whether it's to do a workshop on tree climbing in Japan. The emissions are the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. One of our office staff has his wife was in Japan doing some work, and I asked him if he would go. She was there for a month, so a bit of an extended period, and he chose not to go. Just he missed his wife, of course, but he said, I don't have to go. She's going to be home soon enough, and it's just I would only go for maybe a week. And he said for the amount, and it was just that reason. It just he said the amount of I don't have to put that carbon in the air. At least I can make that choice. And he made that choice to do that. And I think there's people more conscious of that these days. You have it in where you are. I think, it's an unfortunate engineering problem in North America where I don't think the cities, you being in Europe, cities were built before people had all these ways to get around. And the city, it's easy. I find when I'm in Europe how easy it is to get places by foot or other means. Whereas here, you want to walk. I've returned from Europe many times with an affirmation to walk, but it just isn't as easy. There isn't the same thoroughfares. There isn't the same walkways. Makes it quite and things tend to be spaced oddly further apart in some cases as well. So, have you ever noticed that or observed that?
Well, I think historically speaking, I think if you go back to early 20th century, cities in North America were similarly structured to cities in Europe. Um, and it was in the Chrissy Hind in her biography talks about she grew up in I can't remember which city it was, somewhere in Ohio, and she talks about that transformation where neighborhoods were being eradicated, turned into um, big bypasses, motorways, and basically the core of the cities were removed, turned into CBD, and completely restructured cities for cars. And yeah, and it's I think it's ridiculous. I think cars and cities are just such a flawed concept. My vision for the future would be that you have peripheral parkings around cities. When people, that's where people leave cars. Public transport is for free, and there's less cars in cities. Public transport is therefore affordable for everybody. But these are big changes.
Well,
But I do think they're coming.
well, Zermatt. How long has Zermatt been like that? And Zermatt maybe is that an extreme? But
It's an extreme example because these alpine locations are just not accessible otherwise. Very accessible, are they? But if you think about the space we give up for, I was very struck. ITC when you didn't come. ITCC in Copenhagen last year was I thought was very striking because Copenhagen is obviously in Denmark is a big bicycle city. The concept is that you can move faster by bike than by car. They slow down individual motorized traffic. But I was very struck actually that if you split non-motorized from motorized traffic, um, or my impression, at least, I may be wrong, but my impression was that the infrastructure for the non-motorized traffic is where trees would be otherwise. Yeah, so the alleyways are replaced by bike paths and stuff like that. So I was a little bit nonplussed by that, but I have to admit I wasn't there very long. It's just a couple of days, so it may be a wrong impression. But there's just a limited amount of space in cities to work with.
um, you know, I don't even. Well, I know I don't know specifically. Your journey into the trees. I know that you played in trees as a child, like many of us do. But how is it that you ended up on the end of a rope, so to speak?
It was a complete fluke. It was um, Alan Lyons came over. He is originally an Irishman, grew up in the UK, came to Switzerland in 76, 77. His wife to be, her parents lived opposite where I lived with my parents, and I was 6 or 7 at that time. And they were like, they're English. It might be nice for him to speak English with people. So, they introduced him, and I started doing holiday jobs with him as a teenager.
Okay.
And then when I finished school, as I mentioned, dazed and confused, he was looking for somebody to work with him. He's like, do you come work with me? I was like, whatever. It wasn't a lifelong aspiration.
Right.
So lame
As
to
it is
say
for
that.
many of us.
But Chris Cowell always says misfits and hyperactives. You choose which or both. And you look at it. You look at tree care, and you go to events. You're like, yeah,
Oh yeah.
That's a misfit. That's a hyperactive. That's both. That's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a grain of truth in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how many got into it by fluke or a happenstance. I'm the same way. And so often that's a common thread we hear is it wasn't a planned thing. And the other thing that I find fascinating in a lot of people's stories, a common thread is that it's quite grueling and difficult, and it's something about that also keeps it coming back. And you'll see guys come into the business, and if they can make it a year or two and they actually go through a couple seasons and they know what it's all about, because it's not all really glamorous. There's some really cool parts about it, but some parts are really downright grunty. And if you could stick and actually enjoy that, then you often end up in it for many decades or years.
I'd agree. Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is about that part of it, but and I think there's something that it's why the podcast, The Human Force. I really do believe there's something about an appreciation that develops. I really liked your you're talking about a tree, and you're not going to get on with it. Having this, but it's I know it in a way having this relationship with trees, in a
I
sense.
think they're relationships, without a doubt. I get very skeptical when people uh, anthropomorphize, project human traits onto trees, because I think it's doing trees such an injustice, because there's so much more. But I do think it's established that trees they react to their environment. And without a doubt, I'm clear in my mind that trees react to us working on them, be it at a chemical level, at a mechanical level. So in a sense, you are interacting with the tree. It's and at a level, there's a perception of you interacting with it. What that perception is, I would not hazard to guess. I'm sure it's very different from anything that we can imagine. But yeah,
I agree 100%. I know I find in my later years here, I guess, and maybe it's my mind quieting and my misfitness and my hyperactivity blending into what I've been doing. But it's a feeling, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, for lack of a better word. And even in that, it's not a complete definition. It's just a sense or a feeling. I mean, I hover more into the spiritual realm of things, kind of like, and I don't know if it's soulful so much, but there's something about an organism that is all over the planet, but also so long lived. Like, and when you're on the ocean and you happen to see a big old whale or even an old tortoise, any of these older animals that have lived for possibly hundreds or more years, there's a sense of reverence, right? And then you look at a tree that is several hundred, 500, 600. I don't know how you can't help. And I don't think it's just us putting that reverence there. There's something imparted.
yeah, I think it's something that I learned with with qigong, with the qi sort of earth energy type thing, that fizzy energy.
Yes.
And I was like, that's really interesting. I know this fizzy energy. This is tree energy,
Yeah.
and there is qi in the trees
Absolutely.
because they are connected into the ground.
Yeah.
And there's something about that being rooted, which yeah, there's something very healing about that,
I agree.
or something very intriguing about that.
Yeah. And I think it's partly what creates that attraction, that draw. If you somehow you tap into that, it's very difficult to leave it. And I don't think you realize it at first what's happened until if you later in years you have more of a sense of it. Tony, I'm curious. You've been listening to this. You and I haven't talked about this quite to this detail. How have you? I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, I think that there's a definite energy comes out of trees. I think we own a small piece of property a little west of here, and there's two big cucumber magnolia trees there. So they're DBH probably half a meter is the biggest one. The one that's right next to it, within touching distance, is maybe just slightly smaller. And they're probably 100 foot plus, so just under maybe 20, 25 meters, somewhere in that area. But they're wonderful trees because you can stand, and if you have your feet bare and you spread out, you can like touch both trees at the same time, and your feet can be up on the trunk flare, and then your hands on the thing. And just when you stand there and you're looking out at a river, there's just something about doing that there's just a flow to it that I think that had I not spent the years climbing and working in trees, I don't think I would have felt the way I feel it now. And I'll never be able to understand those times. I think every arborist that's climbed and rigged and worked in trees enough has had that moment where you do one thing just because it makes you feel good, but it ends up spanning out. Like you take the piece a little smaller, or you tie it a little differently, or you make a cut a little differently, and it just changes things. And because you got that feeling, that almost like that spidey sense, there was just something Not like the trees warning you. I'm with you, Mark. I don't like when people anthropomorphize because they're not people. It's insulting. Don't call them that. They're not destroying the earth. Leave them alone.
Yeah, because we suck.
Yeah, exactly. Because we do, right? It's like trees don't need us, but we certainly need them. So I don't like when I over anthropomorphize, but I definitely think there is an energy flow there that over time I've come to come in and to be in touch with and to appreciate. And it just, I think there's a piece in a forest or next to a big tree. There's a piece next to a small tree too, but this, when you get trees in large groups like they're supposed to grow, there's an energy there that I think is beneficial to us.
How I understood, how I thought, it's what I assumed that Alex Shigo meant when he said touch trees, that he was basically alluding to that also. The necessity to, and it's the other thing that I notice about tree people is we are very tactile people. A lot of it is about touch. You go to events, people will be touching and hugging and stuff. And if you're trying to explain something to tree people, you do well to use textures as well. I've always wanted to do as a handout a scratch and sniff handout because I think arborists, they'd be all in. Did scratch and sniff as kids? I think that stuff was probably really, really toxic.
I think any equipment instruction manual or any type of technical manual should definitely be scratch and sniff. I just think there's.
I actually started researching. There's some really good smells, but there's really gross ones as well.
Right. Well,
and there's not a lot in between. The middle ground I thought was quite weak in terms of.
Well, it's one of the most powerful senses, and you would definitely, tie the knot. And then scratch, smell. Okay, you'll remember that.
If it's vomit, it's wrong.
Yeah. It could give a whole nother thing to equipment inspection. Like if you scratch the carabiner that fails and it just that's terrible. Oh, nothing to do with that.
That stinks.
Oh man, you would every time you picked up a bad carabiner, you just cringe. You couldn't possibly use it. It would be like smell and taste aversion.
Nobody asks us, Tony.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Why is that?
Probably because when they ask me, I tell them crazy things. Like I tried to get Yale Rope to design me a climbing line that, when it wasn't under tension, you could see it, but as soon as you put it under tension, it went clear. Because then I wanted to look like I was flying. I thought that'd be a great idea. Yeah, they looked at me like, "What the hell kind of idea?" So no wonder the scratch and sniff idea never gets very.
What this guy smoke? Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. That would actually be pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it was right up when I asked the chainsaw chat manufacturers too. So if the chain speed's 60 miles an hour to protect you, I'm like, well, what if I'm doing 60 and I jump out of a truck and hit the chainsaw that's still? Will it still work? And they just look at me and they're like, so no wonder they don't take my ideas seriously.
Yeah.
I just wonder why. I just wanted to know.
Inquiring minds want. Well, the human forest. That's why I really believe that the forest is the example of how we are to be interacting as people. That's why I call it the Human Forestry Podcast, where I got the idea from. I got the name from one of our instructors that was we were ending a session with an in-house group, and he said, I feel like a seedling amongst this forest, right? And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And even, in a forest, you have the trees that fall, and I think of people like Bruce Smith and that, who's still giving back to this forest, this community of people through his memories and others, right? That we learn from, either from their wounds or their breakages from storms or mishaps, or from, actually passing away perhaps. But, I haven't quite figured out a way to talk about it or explain it, but I ask most people at some point in the podcast, how have trees affected your life, or how have you learned lessons that you would have you've drawn from the forest or from the trees that you've applied in your personal life? And not everyone can answer that. And because I think it is true, but I don't know, it's different for everybody, right? Would you be able to articulate that, or would you feel that is applied to you in some way, Mark?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, it's hard to say. I would struggle to differentiate between the activity or the activities you're involved in as an arborist, the interaction with trees, and my biography, they're obviously interwoven.
Right.
I would struggle. It's obviously not a one-way traffic. They're sort of they influence each other.
Right.
I think we had our kids quite young, so we were very early 20s. That's a bit of a crash course in becoming an adult,
Yeah.
in being you know sticking with something, being investing the effort that it's going to take. I think that had an influence on my early career as an arborist, kind of understanding what this is going to and needs to generate income for five people. I've just got to knuckle down. Yeah. Luckily, I found something that was fulfilling for me. Gave me satisfaction, peace of mind. Was physically also hard work, because I am somebody who needs physical exertion in the sort of day in my daily routine. I think it's interesting when we do training, we talk about risk as something negative, and we live in a risk adverse society. My experience with risk is actually, I think, from an evolutionary point of view, I think risk forces us to become better at what we do. I don't think risk is something negative. I think it's just something that's there and we need to do something with. I think working around hazards and managing risk has certainly taught me a lot about being in the moment. That immediacy is one of the things I love about tree work, is that immediate feedback you get. You've done it well, you've done it badly. You sling a piece on a crane, a pick on a crane, you make the cut. It's either going to, just pop off the cut, you got it right, or it's going to spin 180, you got it wrong. There's not many. If you're a dentist or an architect, well, I suppose the building could collapse, but that happens later.
Yeah.
It's not immediate,
Yeah.
if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's something quite special to tree work.
Yeah.
Immediate feedback. And also, there's all sorts of stuff like that where the one has influenced the other. But I certainly think it's made me a more whole and balanced person. And I don't say that lightly. And it's been up. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. That's probably a foolish rabbit hole to start going down.
Well, we've gone down some rabbit holes, and you mentioned Dazed and Confused a couple times. I mean, I've spent quite a few years myself in situations like that. And again, it was partly desperation, partly maturation, or that all collided into a realization. For me to slow down, and has given me opportunity to even make some course corrections for my own personal life, but also that's allowed me to view things differently and to expand my thinking into appreciating more what I have done, and these relationships that exist with people and trees as well. So, I don't know how often I think it's how do I put this? Our personal journeys and our struggles, that the risk assessments that we maybe didn't do a good enough job of in our own personal lives, but we've definitely learned from them. And I think it's important at some point, somehow, that we start to communicate that to others. Maybe it could help them. Maybe it could, they might see something and avoid something that we went through that might have been, and it applies. We've been doing it in training when it comes to cutting and climbing, but maybe not quite as much in our own personal life, and that.
Well, would it, Dwayne? I mean, I look back at myself. If somebody had said to me, "You're heading down a dark path," would I have changed something? I don't think I could have changed something. I think some things just need to happen. But I do think it's worth saying, consider your life choices. Try and look at things in a holistic fashion. That you and but again, to me, this is something that I've understood better with age, is that this is the one body I have. This is the tool I have to work with, and if I mess it up, it's messed up. So the longer, the more I'm become aware of that, and it's work. It's active work keeping that all together. But certainly today, I feel better than I have for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, and also the connection, the connection to what I've found is expanding the connections to within myself, allowing slowing down enough or opening up enough or being willing and honest enough for my mind to comprehend what's actually happening in the body and not have a sense of, I think there's a lot of denial and a lot of stubbornness. And maybe that's part of youth too. Maybe it is. I don't know. But slowing down enough to allow yourself to see what's occurring. Because I didn't notice. I was like a frog in water, kind of like I didn't really in boiling water. I didn't really notice it was getting hot.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? In a sense, the three of us have been through a similar sort of trajectory, haven't we?
Yeah.
A massive over expansion, being everything to everybody,
Yeah.
be traveling all over the place. Then there's this, and then there's this, and when you're in that mindset, you're like, oh yeah, and I can just slot in that event between that event, then I go directly from there to there to there, and you look back at it, and you're just like, but why? But there is an internal logic to that.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is fulfilling expectations,
Yeah.
not letting people down. For me, it was certainly, I
Absolutely.
created this persona, which was, Mark Bridge saves world, Mark Bridge saves people. And I was like, there came a point where I was like, actually, people save people. There's a degree of hubris involved.
Yeah.
If people can't save themselves, I'm not going to say I can't save them.
That's right.
So, and that allows you to step back a little bit and actually, as you say, breathe and reflect and yeah, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the first harness and climbing system that you climbed on? The knot you used, and do you remember what it was?
Yeah. It was, so this was 1990. I started on one of the French harness, one of those Comet harnesses, the
Oh,
orange and blue ones.
oh yeah.
Without They basically had big side D's and sort of front, small D's that we just tied things into. And it would have been, I think it was, nylon twisted 3-ply Marlow type rope with, splice like the English sort of style Prussics.
Right.
Um, yeah,
An English
yeah,
prusik, like the for a hitch.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was that for a couple of years, and this was 1990. So yeah, and then I'm going to say maybe sort of 4 or 5 years in, I think Christian Nellen in Munich was one of the first people in Europe selling gear. There was Peter Stinor and Knupfopper and Degeray.
Right. Yeah.
And I think 93, 94, I ordered some safety blue high V
Yeah.
from Christian Nellen.
Yeah.
And I can remember the job that I was on with that rope, tied to Blake's hitch.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, this is a step change.
Yeah.
So hard to communicate,
Yeah.
but I can remember the job, and it was just like, yeah,
I agree. I
that was
remember
extraordinary.
Safety Blue. It performed well. It felt good, but it also was color, right? It was so cool to have color suddenly because everything was drab colors. Like it was all white, brown, gray, or gray, basically dirty white, right? Basically, is what everything was, or yellow, very industrial, and you started seeing these when color came out, and it's astonishing if you look at it today. My goodness.
Yeah, it was a complete different take on as you say, before that it was quite industrial, and I think Safety Blue Hy-Vee was the first line that kind of stepped outside that a little bit by mistake. I think it was the intent was to make it high vis, but I think the effect was quite profound.
And did you go through the Don Blair harness phases with some of the stuff he did? Because he started doing kind of saddle innovation for the very first time.
That's right. So Dave McIntyre was is a good friend. He was sort of my mentor. He was a good friend of Alan's. He started with Kusher in Berlin. He's a Scotsman. Came over to Berlin. And then came down to southern Germany with Uli Pfeffer, and they started a company up the road from here. And he was, I don't know where he'd met Don Blair. I think, was it in the US? Anyway, he had one of Don's Sierra Moreno harnesses, and I loved it. I thought it looked so cool, and
Yeah.
but yeah, I tried climbing it, and I just could not get on with it. Just because the pressure it put on your hips, like the Willens.
Yeah.
The Cresto harnesses as well. Alan was using a T22, a Willens harness, and if you look at old photographs of the 70s, people hanging in trees, suspended in their harness, have a sort of X-legged stance,
Yeah.
because that's what the harnesses did to your hips.
Yeah.
So I think when people say, old timers say, footlocking killed my hips, I'm always a little bit skeptical, because I think the harnesses have something to answer for as well.
Absolutely.
That and standing on spikes.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, because you got your knees knocked together, and you're forcing your hip joints that are constantly under load in an unnatural way. It's there was a lot to be desired there for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Hold on. I've just remembered one thing while you're thinking, while you're collecting yourself, Dwayne.
Yeah.
One funny thing that we did was just to show how times have changed. In the crew, we're quite a tight knit crew. The first sort of 4 or 5 years before we became aware that other people were doing tree care as well, we were using as anchor points. We were using round slings with 2 carabiners in, and we would put the rope through the carabiners. But girth this round sling,
right,
2 carabiners, and the carabiners we were using were the old carabiners with the gates that weren't closing properly anymore from the climbing systems. You put up there, and I look back at that today, and I'm like, that is so it's flawed in so many ways. This carabiner is shit. Just use it on your anchor point. I mean, what could go wrong? I've got to talk to Alan about that. Actually, I don't quite know how that came to be. I'm sure there was a.
Well, I've always wondered about the need to recycle and preserve that arborists have. Like, it's just astonishing. And I was the same. Like, oh no, it's still good. I'll just tie a piece of webbing on this strap and it'll be fine. It's just getting comfortable. Like, and if it wasn't good for one thing, it had another application, and it might still be very important application. But like you said, I won't trust it for my lifeline, but I'll hook my lifeline into it. It's really interesting. I've never figured out exactly where that sense of preservation comes from. I've never understood exactly where that, like, how we inherited that. Did it come from the times, or it's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid you should throw away a chunk of rope.
Right.
Like, Jesus, this thing won't hold my 170-pound skinny ass anymore, so I'll rig off of it.
Absolutely.
There's what could go wrong there? Instead of using this carabiner close to me where I can see it fail, I'm going to put it way far away so I never see the failure coming.
But it seemed sensible at the time. It was just what you did. It was logical. Well, you don't throw it away. Now it's a good rigging line, as if rigging line isn't as important as a lifeline. But same with the used motor oil in the chainsaw, right? Like, that's, recycle that stuff. Came across recently a guy that's still doing that. He thought he's pretty clever. He saves his used motor oil and puts it in bar oil. So he's recycling, it's good for the environment. He's recycling his motor oil in the chainsaw.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That was quite common. Like, a lot, it was long.
We had one guy when in '92 I did the first arborist exam in Switzerland, And there was one guy there who was selling gear at that point in time. I have to say, he's not selling gear anymore today. And he said that, when your rope goes a bit fluffy, that's fine. You just stick it in the oven. Just leave it in there for 20 minutes and, gets rid of that fluff, and you're good to go.
It's a half-baked idea. I had to see that one coming.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just a melted block of polyester or nylon or whatever.
I think if you ever, I'm not a chemist or a mathematician by any means. I'm a liberal arts major. But when you start to understand that your climbing line is basically one molecule away from a Walmart bag, you have a new appreciation for recycling ropes and what you do to them. It's like,
Yeah, we probably ought to specify here on the podcast that it's not a good idea.
Yeah,
Right,
Your
right,
climbing
right.
line
Exactly.
in the oven.
Exactly.
Do not try this at home,
do
children.
don't bake your climbing line.
Do not bake your climbing line.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to stink and make your partner angry.
Exactly.
I remember Nike Air, and they had the air in the sole. They had those little clear bubbles in the sole. They were really expensive. My buddy in first year university, he got a pair, and they were and he got them dirty. He wanted to clean, so he cleaned them up, and he wanted to wear them, and he put them in the oven to dry them, right? And because he wanted to wear them that night, and it expanded the little sack in there and burst his runners. He completely destroyed them, and he was just all about them, and he coveted them, and then they were just ruined. He couldn't even wear them. I thought it was hilarious.
It reminds me of the time, one of the things that happens in tree work is obviously, any of your friends or your partner who, people who are not involved in tree work, they'll say that any gear involved with tree work stinks.
Yeah.
Garby, my partner, says it smells of hamsters. So anyway, one day I was at work, I was looking at my rain jacket, and it was just absolutely filthy. I was like, do you know what? Going to be adult about this. Going to take it home. Going to wash it. So I got all the right products to wash it with. Stuck in the washing machine. Came out clean. Looking at the jacket, I was like, "Oh, there's a little hole in the sleeve," and I was like, no, we're going to do this. I'm going to do this right. So, I'm going to go and get a patch, like a sort of, Gore-Tex type patch, whatever. I'm going to read up on it. I'm going to get and usually when I'm doing stuff like this, and I, don't read the fucking manual, just go in, do it intuitively. So, but I didn't. In this case, I didn't. I read about it. I did a bit of research. I got everything set up with the ironing board and the iron. Ironed on the patch, and as I'm ironing it on, there's a terribly strange smell coming off the rain jacket. Take off the iron, and there's a sodding great big triangle of the rain jacket stuck to the iron. There is a big triangle missing out of the rain jacket, and I swear this hole was maybe 1 millimeter. It was so frustrating. So next time, I am not going to read the manual again. I'm just going to. In fact, I've sort of probably just left the hole alone. Anyway.
Yeah, well, sometimes things backfire, right? And,
yeah, these things can go wrong, can't they?
Heat. Well, generally with heat, heat as a part of, even shock load, it has heat associated with it, and it usually results in some type of failure, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whether it be an iron, a sunburn, or a burnt, rope running through your hand too fast.
The throw line tattoos.
Yeah. Oh.
On around your wrist.
Yeah, throw line are definitely. Yeah, the throw line stories abound.
They sting. There was Brett Pryor, who's a bit of a character. He lives down in Wellington. He's sort of, he's part Maori, and he's sort of rude boy type character. Just to give you an idea, Brett has his motorbike in his living room, right? And he was working in Germany, and he had big dreads at that time. Working in Germany, he's setting a line in the tree, fires the big shot, and somebody kicks him in the back of the head. Why would that happen? I don't know. Brett jumps up. He's bleeding off the back of his head, And he's like, who was that? Goes looking for whoever kicked him in the back of his head. Turns out it was the throw line had got wrapped round one of the dreads.
Oh,
And when he fired the big shot, it took off with the dread and partially scalped Brett. So
Why
there you go.
Why is
That
that
is a
squirrel
big
flying
shot
through the
story.
air?
That's a big shot story I haven't heard. Oh man, the force. They'd be sudden and fast, exactly, the way you'd want to do
Like
it.
pulling a tooth, yeah.
It would feel like someone kicked you in the back of the head.
It did, yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Just a whoops.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Oh, the stories abound, though. Well, I didn't know if we'd get there, but I'm debating asking you about the how it came to pass that three guys called the Tree Imagineers got together and invented, the cool, that I think the pulley and the harness at least, and there's many more, but those were kind of which came first, the harness, didn't it?
They were together.
Okay.
Beddoes was working on the tree motion, or on what was to become the tree motion, and Chris and I were working together at that time. Chris Carr and I, and had it. What had started off as a discussion about misconfiguring connectors, carabiners in our work positioning systems, kind of evolved into considering different techniques to mitigate that misconfiguration. Evolved into actually we're missing a piece of gear, thinking about what that piece of equipment could look like. So that is really parallel to Beddoes developing the True Motion prototype. And then we started. There's if I don't know if you've seen that video on YouTube, the Origins video that we did about the harnesses. It's quite interesting.
I need to
Bettis
watch it.
talks a lot about those early iterations. It's certainly worth looking at.
Okay.
And yeah, and
And where would you find that on your guys' on Tree Imagineers site? Where would you find that?
Certainly DMM have it on their site.
Okay.
Our website is a bit sad at the moment, but if you go to DMM to their YouTube channel, the Origins video is on there.
Okay.
And we started talking in 2003 in Westonbirt. That was the first time that we got together. And from there, started moving the prototype forward, started talking to manufacturers, which was a long, painful, drawn-out process. I don't think it's something that we set out to do, but it was just something that we perceived as something that was lacking in the industry. Just there are tools we don't have that we'd like to have.
Yeah.
So we started moving it forward, and one of the steps was to say, we need an interface that manufacturers can understand. So we're like, well, we better do a company, which was Tree Imagineers, and then it kind of evolved from there. But actually, the development of gear is only one part of Tree Imagineers. Actually, to me, Tree Imagineers is about diving deeper and gaining a deeper understanding of what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, including what we do it with, i.e. the tools. But so, rigging research that we were involved with, or, the rigging configuration tests that we did in Dunkeld in 2014. There's all sorts of things that we've done over the years, pieces of research that have certainly helped me understand better, the background to what we do. It's woefully underpublished.
Okay.
Like the rigging research is a piece of that. Of course, was health the HSE and Treevolution who did that. We were Chris was very involved with that. I was peripherally involved, but again, and Andy Detter was very much a driving force behind that.
Yeah.
But again, that's a document that is completely underused.
Yeah, I don't.
information out there that we're not tapping into.
There seems to be a bit of that, like sort of silos of information in different spots that somehow doesn't get fully. I don't know what it is, why it doesn't get fully shared, or I'm not sure, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Do you think it's maybe because people are more interested in short and easy answers?
Well,
Huh.
if yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that Shiga would talk a lot about that. Shiga talked a lot about that. Um, there's so much tree work is done because it's quick money, and and even equipment, and certainly he would talk a lot in relation to treatments. That there's these treatments that are just not. They're not. A lot of things aren't done in tree ease. People don't like trees talk real slow, and they communicate slow, and everything's slow, and like Tony, your favorite saying about Kim Coder, I think about that a lot, about how you take a tree apart is the way it was put together. And a tree, 100-year-old oak is big, but it got there really one little piece at a time, like very small layer at a time. And there is so much to really know about tree work, right from rigging to fertilizing to climbing to to bracing or pruning, that requires a lot of uh, reading, thinking, synthesizing, pondering, listening, and learning. And we mentioned the misfits and the hyperactives. That typically is a disconnect between those groups until we get older. It seems like.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I think I think people don't separate methods from principles either. I think that, the methods there's a lot of ways to get tree work done, right? There's a lot of ways to rig a limb off. There's a lot of ways to cut a tree down. There's a lot of ways to do many things. But, there's a lot of methods, but the principles that guide those methods are relatively few, right? When you talk about tree felling, like if you were to put tree felling into one sentence, it'd be a face cut with a back cut, forms a hinge, gives a reasonable amount of reliability. That's a principle. There's a lot of methods that will get you there. And I think the methods are shiny and glamorous, and people like them quick, right? Nobody wants to really sit down and think about the principles of it very much, or try to boil it down and make those match. And when I end up in discussions / arguments / whatever with people about it's usually always about methods. It's very rarely about principles. One, because we either agree on the principles or they don't have a clue what the principle is. They're just arguing a method. And I think that social media to an extent has exacerbated that. It's made it very easy to spread methods with total ignorance of the principles of it. And I think that, like when you look at tree gear, we talked about this with Don Blair. It's like, for me, for a piece of gear to be innovative, it has to solve a problem for me, not just be another color, right? So,
don't get me going. I'm just going to open the blinds quick. It's getting a bit dark in here. Don't go away.
No, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So, I just think that a lot of it comes down to, like Mark, you said, everybody wants the quick answer. Everybody wants a new method, but nobody wants to sit around and explore the principles that go behind those methods, because it takes more time, right? If thinking were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah, it reminds me of Chris Cooper-Abs was talking about that in Augsburg, about the how, what, and why as three parts, working in a circle. The how and the what are easy, but the why is the difficult, and the principles is the why we do stuff.
Yeah.
And that's people do struggle with that, and I have to say I am quite concerned with the point that we're at with our industry at the moment, where there's I went to the Swiss climbing comp a couple of weeks ago, and boy, we've all been involved with the comps, and gear check, that has become a really difficult thing to run.
Yeah.
Setting these events up has become difficult to do because there's basic compatibilities between rope diameters, requirement of rope diameters for devices. There's devices out there, and this is my absolute soapbox at the moment, that are only good for a one-person load, i.e., you cannot perform a rescue on them.
Right.
So what the comps are doing at the moment is understandably, is they're skirting the issue by not having pick-off scenarios.
Right.
Now, in my world, at, at this point in time, every single comp should be running pick-off rescues to put a spotlight on that issue.
Right.
We have to force this issue because, what a shocking state of affairs that as an industry, we at this point in time, we're not able to reliably run pick-off rescues because of device issues.
Yeah.
And I'm not pointing fingers. This is my personal opinion. I'm not. It's not a matter of putting blame on anybody, but it's not a happy situation.
Well,
Totally agree with you. If you were to look at it from a realistic standpoint, when you look at the numbers of the incidents that are happening where arborists are actually rescuing people, it's almost always a pickoff type rescue. That's when arborists do rescues, that's typically what we're doing, right? They're going up and transferring load onto your system and then coming down. Now, granted, those are few and far between in the world of rescue. Most of the rescues are performed by EMT and rescue crews, and they're devoid of tree care equipment. But you're absolutely right. We're losing the sight of the fact that part of the competition was to help breed awareness and safety into our industry. And now we're turning it into a show pony to an extent. And we're ignoring a very real issue, right? This equipment isn't designed to do what it might need to do.
I'm just concerned that people are going to get hurt because they assume that their gear can do something that it can't, and they will find out in the worst possible situation, and that people are going to get hurt.
Well, there's innovation and expansion that's part of it. New equipment being designed or different, but then there's also, I think, even with the comps and with the whole industry, but with the social media, the ease of information and the way you can see and observe things, and that looks great, and try it. Like I got a text recently from a long-term client with some guy showing some weird, strange way to deal with a loaded tree. I mean, I guess it kind of works, but he's asking me, "What do you think of this?" And he's wondering if we should change the way we do something. And that's fair enough, but there's so much of that, and how many people don't even ask or don't inquire. They just, I should try that. And it affects right from climbing right through to, and something Don Blair mentioned in his podcast that I keep thinking about is, it used to be back when you started a company, and you mentioned it, Mark, where you had a good tight crew and, you didn't even know anyone else was doing tree work. You kind of relied on each other, and there was a check and balance that took place within the seniority and whatever within your group. But now with climbers don't take a lot of time, and there's this money to be made as a contractor, and you had guys really freelancing, a lot of freelance, a lot more than ever before. And his question was like, who's mentoring or when you're your own boss, there's no one to say you're doing it good or doing it dangerously. And that was his point. And I wonder how much, that's affecting all this kind of stuff, because, the influencers, as they're known, is that's what measures or how stuff gets, if you see it, an influencer's using it, it must be safe and good to use. And that's kind of the measuring stick I think some people apply to things these days. I don't know, maybe I'm off base.
As you can see, I'm hesitant to even say something about that. It's such a complex issue, isn't it? These social media is not without its merits. I mean, but this very fast, reactive communication, I struggle with. Again, maybe that's just subjective, but what has served me well in life is when somebody posts something or says something that really annoys me, I will write a flaming response, just put it to one side, sleep over it, and delete it the next day. I think that's a good idea,
right?
Because often the knee-jerk reaction, the immediate response,
Yep.
is not going to be the one that's most beneficial to resolving the situation.
Right.
But I think in many instances, those gloves are off. Those filters are no longer being applied.
Yeah.
But again, maybe that's just me being, I don't know, old-fashioned or something. I don't know. But it's certainly the world we live in, and somehow we're all adapting to it in one way or another, and it's affecting every part of our lives.
Yeah, I can agree. I mean, like I said, even a mild criticism response on social media is a lot like when the boss just shows up on a job site and just starts, "What the hell are you guys all doing this all wrong? I would never do it this way, blah, blah, blah." And nobody ever likes that. So it's just very, I mean, I always tell people when it comes to social media, and I use that term very broadly, right? Social media for me is meant to be that sort of that instant access. And you're right. There's a lot of good to it. I've learned a ton of things on social type media. They're very interesting, and that's great. There's a lot, but there's also a lot of bad. What I tell people when it comes to things like climbing and tree work is never use it as your first point of reference, right? You should get your first point of reference should come from a much more reliable source, a trusted person in the industry, a book, something that's been filtered through, and then use it as sort of a juxtaposition to that. Because there is a lot of good things there, but there's a lot of bad. And I used to get a little bit more angry and respond a little bit more, but now I realize if I won't use social media as a trainer to train things. So I'm not going to reply either, because if I don't think it's good enough to train, it's probably not good enough for my response. It's not going to accomplish anything. So I just tend to step away from it.
But this is part of the problem, reasonable. That's what reasonable people do, Tony.
Right.
And it leaves, well, I'd like to come back to one thing you were talking about before with the principles and the, what were you talking about?
Methods
and
methods.
And methods. Yeah. And there's one thing that I'd like to add to that, which to me has always stood out about tree work, which is, to me, it's a conduit. It's a way of expressing creativity, creatively applying tools, mental and physical tools to solving problems, but then also using creativity to express the culture of your company in your yard, for instance, using creativity to describe issues in workshops. To me, the Tree Care Days in Augsburg is very much a place where I can use my creativity to express myself, with the people coming there as speakers to Climbers Forum. We've explored many, many topics there, and it's something that I find really interesting, developing new ways of addressing maybe old problems or re-examining something, identifying new issues, and discussing solutions or ways to do things better. And all of this has to do with creativity. Yeah. To me, that's it's an essential part of tree work.
Yeah.
You're not just pulling the same lever 10,000 times a day.
Right.
You're being forced to adapt to each individual tree, each individual, as the day goes by. Even in alignment of trees, no two trees are the same.
That's right.
It's going to force you to be creative in how you address those problems, the work positioning problems, the rigging problems, the access problems.
And it's again one of those things I think that attracts people and keeps us in the business. Because it's always something a little bit different. I mean, there's a lot of commonalities, but never, no one climbs the same. It just isn't. It just never. Every tree is different, and that speaking of misfits and hyperactive, that's perfect. Because I think that somehow we connect with that. It reminds us of ourselves. Not every day is going to be exactly the same. And I think it's the mother of all invention. The solving a problem. I was recently describing. Well, I was telling Tony about it earlier today. How Rip and I used to always we would do this slide lines demo at the end of the rigging class, and for the longest time we were tying a shackle in line just below So in the just below the marl or the half hitch, because we couldn't tie it onto the piece when it was under load, and then we would use that to hook into a traveler into the slide line. And that was our connection to it. And we were doing a class and I forgot to tie it in. And Rip was down on the ground explaining, and I knew what he was expecting to happen next. And he had hoisted the piece up. It was lifted up because we'd rigged it over, absorbed the shock load. Now we're going to pick it up and then tension the slide line and slide it out. And I'm sitting there going, shit, I didn't put the shackle in. It's hanging on my belt. And he doesn't know yet this has happened. And I'm like, oh boy, what am I going to do? And Rip's particular, right? So I'm like, I'm going to be in shit for this one. And, but I had a two-eyed tail. I had on my belt, and I was like, I'm just going to tie it French Prusik. And I just, as many wraps as I could, because I didn't know how heavy the log was. I know we were in Vancouver. It was a big hunk of fur. And I just wrapped it up full as I could, hooked it in and hooked the shackle in there. And I made it really small and compact. So I thought maybe he won't even notice, But sure as shit, he's explaining it to everybody. And he's looking up, and Dwayne's tied the, he's got, okay. Well, that should work. And I could see him, and he gives me the look, like, what the F have you done? But he didn't, Rip was a gentleman, right? So he didn't berate me or give me trouble in front of the class. It was afterwards. He said, what the hell was that? He saw it when it came down, and he said, you know what? That's the best thing we've ever done. We got to do it that way from now on.
Call it the Dwayne.
And it was just a mistake, but so often that's what it was like. I mean, because then it was like, is enough wraps? And we never did have it slide. We never did have it slip. It never overloaded. And we of course we had to talk it over with his nibs there and make sure it was okay with the grand poobah of the whole thing. And we fortunately, I think Rip and I would have gone and done it ourselves anyway, but.
Well, the story about the Distel is Uli Distel mistying a Swabish Prusik ended up in the Distel. So yeah, sometimes mistakes are a good thing or lead to interesting results.
And that's why I try not to, as much as I think there is a lot of stuff out there that's crazy on social. I try, especially if it's gaining it's generating some traction. I try to look at it with an open mind, at least, because you never know. I think back, Mark. I remember very clearly, Mr. Bingham in
2008
in Chicago, and there was you and myself and Scott and Andrew. There was
it was Providence, was it?
Was it Providence? I thought it was in Chicago. I remember you scratching your head, and to this day, I admire this about you and you've said it a couple of times in this conversation, but where you'll go, that's very interesting. And you're thinking about it, and you use the word that's very complex, and that's what you said to Kevin. You said there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. This is and it was and we agreed at that point to let him use it, to try it in the comp, but he ended up missing a meeting and not using it that year. But do you recall that?
Oh, vividly, yes. Yeah, it was an unfortunate way that all started out, wasn't it? It was, for whatever reasons, you can go backwards and forwards over it. It was quite divisive.
Yeah.
I think people got quite heated. Which, certainly from my side, it was never the intent to veto anything. It was just, we were tasked by ISA to assess whether this is safe, and all we were saying is, can you provide us with data? Can you give us something? We would like to allow it, but if we're not being given anything, we can't. We can't. No. So it's that certainly. Looking back, it's certainly something I got pretty badly burnt over that.
Okay.
I felt that I was being left in the cold also by the organisation.
Yeah.
I felt they weren't as supportive as they could have been.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a groundswell building because lots of people were interested in it. Today it's hard to imagine what it was like because it's so established.
Yeah.
But certainly then it's not a good memory.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I remember the shirt you made
Yeah,
for Portland.
yeah. The technical advisory committee. Yeah, it was a cluster. It was like a cluster fuck of gear, and it said in Latin. It said, "Not here to make friends."
Yeah.
I say technical advisory committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. That one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I have to commend Kevin. He stuck to his guns.
Yeah.
The guy has this was one of these people with one of these rare people with a spark of genius, like Abedis as well, and they just come up with stuff that
Yeah.
they see stuff that other people don't.
Yeah. 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 And he saw it through, and he got, I often wonder, as painful as it was, and, you were there was more of you. I was on the committee, but I was in a periphery. I didn't have to face the brunt in the same way, but I observed it, and I certainly know it was real. But Kevin maybe wouldn't have, I wonder how much that struggle and that strife helped it to become what it is today. I think it was all part of it. Like you were talking about earlier, if we'd warn all the young people about the things they're doing and how it'll turn out, they'll end up just like us. You're still going to head down that road, and we didn't make it easy, but it wasn't because we were trying to make it hard. We were trying to it needed to be done right, and maybe he wouldn't have done that, and maybe it wouldn't be what it is if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Dwayne. The one thing that I'd say to that I'd respond to that is when we brought the hitch climber and the tree motion to Minneapolis in 2006, we brought a huge stack of documentation. It was at that point in time, it was pre-certified. We had pre-certified it. So it was, I think it was production hardware, or it was anyway. Um, but we understood the necessity. It's on us to explain why we believe this is safe.
Yeah.
We brought that information to Scott and to Tim Bushnell.
Yeah. Yeah.
They looked at it, and on the basis of that documentation, they were like, "Yeah, you're good to go."
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to rock up to an event
No.
and just go like, "I think this is a good idea," and assume that people are going to go, "Yeah, that's a really good idea."
Right.
Just hold your finger in the wind and see, and then just go, "Yeah, you're good to go." It's not realistic.
No. 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 Well,
So anyway,
and especially at the event like that where you have, if worst case scenario was to take place, the accountability, there needs to be some accountability. It'd be one thing if you're trying it out on your tree crew or even yourself, on a climb in the backyard or whatever. But when you're running an event and you got everybody involved, it's a little different. There's lots to
and
think about.
even on a tree, I think the only situation where I see a difference is if I'm doing it for myself.
Right. Right.
Anything beyond that
Yeah.
that involves other people, be it your crew,
Yep.
be it a
You're right.
workshop, be it an event. And I, obviously I stepped away from comps, whenever it was, 2019. And I think I was talking to Didge about this the other day, and I'm deeply grateful that to have gone through those 10, 11 years, 12 years, whatever it was, and nobody got hurt on our watch. Because it is a real scenario. People are trying to go as fast as they can. They're doing stuff that, unusual stuff they're maybe not used to, under pressure, in a tunnel, whatever. There is a real possibility that, so, thankfully that didn't happen. But, to me, as head technician of ETCC and then ITCC later, I was very aware of that. This with my signature is what I'm confirming. Is I've looked at this, I've assessed it, I've said it, and I've said it's safe. And if I'm not sure, I'm going to have to turn it down, because liability wise, I think you're putting yourself fully in the firing line. And I didn't trust, and I don't trust ISA 100% that you're not going to wake up to a horrible shock when things have gone wrong.
Yeah, you may not have the backing that you thought you had.
That you thought you had.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's the truth. But
Yeah.
again, I don't say that resentfully or anything. I think it's just the way that insurance works. If there's gross negligence,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, and I think that would be viewed as gross negligence,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the protection that you thought you had, it becomes quite tenuous.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of company owners or guys that start their own business or even freelancers don't understand the magnitude of that either. They're not aware of how much risk they are in the event. It's like a seatbelt. It only matters if you need it, or or a parachute, or any of these. When you need it, and it better work. Otherwise, you could go on obliviously, not knowing you're at risk. It's a weird. How is that said? A good safety program is the hardest thing to measure because there's no accidents. How do you know if it's effective? Well, maybe if we did nothing would have happened. Well, maybe because the company down the road hasn't had anything happen. They don't do a thing. Well, it's a matter of when, more like, right? Although,
And it's a matter of ethics,
yes,
Dwayne.
yeah,
At the end of the day,
yeah,
it's a matter of doing the right
yeah,
thing. And does that make me 100% safe? No. Do you know what? Because that's probability, and
right,
probability strikes indiscriminately.
correct.
But from an ethical point of view, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that everybody on my crew goes home safely every evening.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. It's not. It's a yeah, it's a conscious choice, and it's a decision based on ethics.
Very much. That's interesting. It's also why you're held negligent. Because
If you don't,
if you don't, because you are, fundamentally you're selfishly ignoring the risk to others. Especially if it's an owner type situation, and you just choose for the sake of finances or whatever your reason is, but you're not actually the one that's going to get hurt. It's even worse. And that maybe, that's why there's restitution, and it's part of the reason there's those investigations exist and the rules exist the way they do when something happens. And if you're ethically inclined and you are genuinely caring for your people, that comes through the investigation.
and I think we just recently did with the crew. I did a first aid course, and there was some mountain guides there as well, and there was some pretty grim situations that were being discussed. And from a selfish point of view, I have an interest in making sure that my crew stays safe, because I'm sure you've had this in training situations as well, where you've come into a crew where somebody's died, and the collateral damage is horrific. And I think if I lost somebody out of my crew, I think that might be it for tree work for me. I think that might be curtains.
Right.
And I love tree work too much for that to happen.
Right.
So on a selfish level,
Yeah.
That's another reason to make sure that people don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to lose, the passion that I have for tree work. And part of that is everybody staying safe.
Absolutely.
And even that's no guarantee.
Well, that's what I like what you said about the probability ship, right? It lands where it lands and it strikes when it strikes. But the best defense to that is a good offense in the safety realm, right? And genuinely having that intention and mindset. And if you don't, that's the best word is negligence, because you're ignoring what could happen. You're not preventing it from happening. You're just doing everything you can to make everyone aware and and that's what they look for in the investigation. I mean, that's what due diligence is all about. Are you doing everything you can? Because shit does happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. That's hey, well, it ties right back in with the documentation we were looking for. We're back in the beginning with the wrench, right? It was all about that.
I think one of the things that you almost have to be on the inside looking out, involved with the ITCC for as long as I was. What people need to understand too is what happened on Sunday at the Masters Challenge. Countless people were going to imitate Monday morning, right? Whether it was a good technique or a bad technique. And it's the same argument I give people, say, well, I've done this unsafe act, whatever it is, hundreds of times, and I haven't gotten hurt yet. Well, that's the probability, right? But how many people have watched you do it and now they do it, and then you've passed that on, you've propagated it. And I don't think enough people appreciated, at that time, I can't speak to it now because I'm not involved with the ITCC anymore. But at that time, when I came up through from like 2000 to 2019, it was where new ideas came out and climbers would do it. I watched Bettis do stuff in a Masters Challenge, and Monday morning, I watched someone do it at work, and there was a burden of responsibility with that, right? Because what we let happen at those competitions was going to be repeated. And if you don't have data to back it up, or at the very least a set of instructions for inspection, you're negligent to let that out there. And I don't think enough people ever truly appreciate it. I probably maybe don't appreciate it to this day, that there is a huge ethical cost and burden to that. Because if you permit it, right, then you've promoted it.
And it's funny. It always makes me laugh a little bit, not humorously, but in a I don't know what the word is, but let's not forget we're dealing with an industry that claims the lives of someone on a frequent basis. We're not talking about every once in a while someone gets hurt. We're talking about people hospitalized weekly. We're talking about people dying monthly. We're talking about why everything else aside, just look at the statistics of what's happening to people like John Valiant talks about in the book The Golden Spruce, about loggers being killed and maimed in a chilling assortment of ways that combine industrial accidents, warfare, and torture. I mean, this is the work we do. Why on earth would you take any chance above and beyond? Because it's already effing dangerous. Like it's just irresponsible to, and somehow we forget that. Somehow or I know I have, and I've witnessed it many times. It's like, wait a minute, guys. You realize we're doing one of the most dangerous things you can do. Why would we add anything? Or why would we not take every possible precaution? But I don't know. Of course, there's the romance and the thrill of things, but man, there's enough going on in this. You don't need to add any extra. You don't need any more hot sauce on this tamale.
I think for me, operating closer to home base today, doing less travel, more engaged with people immediate around me. I was really struck by Frank Turner, who's a singer-songwriter. He has one of his recent albums was called "Be More Kind." Is just being kind to people. Be kind and be considerate and look out for people.
Yeah.
But that circle of people for me has become quite small.
Right.
So the world around me can go crazy and be completely unhinged, but I'm just doing my little bit for the people around me, my circle of friends, my team, the people we work with, and make sure we're all safe. And then obviously there's events like Augsburg, there's Vertical Connect up in the Alps next month, but yeah, I've certainly focused my energy better today. I think.
A tree's roots can only go so far, and you right now your roots are connected with the trees and the roots that are near you, and that's the way a forest. Again, to me, it just when you were saying that, it just the example of how the forest operates. And
otherwise you become tumbleweed.
Yeah, your roots can only go so far, and you need to stay rooted, and you can't. And there's a real value in that. Really, there is. I mean, there's what we have, the gift we have, I think, as humans, is that we can have these moments in time where we can go and actually have a rooted type connection at an event somewhere and so on. But it's important to return to our forests and to nurture them and build them. And you're talking the perfect example of it. And the travel is glamorous and all that, but I definitely took it to an extreme, but I did that with a lot of things in my life.
Yeah, you were always a good reference point. I was like, oh boy, I've been on the road quite a bit, and then I was like, yeah, but then there's Dwayne. So it is good. It's good to have somebody who's a step.
I'm glad
the far end of the bell curve.
Dwayne's worse than me.
The far end of the bell curve.
Yeah, I definitely took it. So I remember Dr. Shaiga talking to me one time. We were visiting, and he had stopped traveling for the very same reasons. He stayed home because he would always say, Dwayne, the road will eat you alive.
Fair comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and he, you know, it resonated. That statement I heard long before I stopped traveling as much, but I always thought about it. Yeah. So, you know, it's like anything. You can. I think the middle path, you know, as the Buddhist talks about, there's anything in extreme. There you can have too little or too much. It's learning for someone with like my personality type. I to find an equilibrium that isn't on one end of the spectrum or the other is really the challenge, and something I have to very purposely focus on and be aware of myself and what my needs are in order to be able to do that, and you know, not allow things that quickly take me out of that process, you know, to that, like drinking, for example, was an easy fix to that it could quiet that voice, that noise in the mind, but it was temporary and it didn't really work, and in time became a damaging thing. And so, you know, I like what you said, Mark, about your body needs the physical activity, and I need that too. Like, and knowing what you need and then being disciplined to give yourself what you need. That is not something that's
Nurturing.
intuitive. That is something you have to actually. It's called discipline, I think.
No, agreed. Yeah.
You know,
And I think the thing, once you're in that disbalance, I think the disbalance feeds itself. You know, you're up front, you're in front of people, proposing one thing, and at some level realizing that you're not fulfilling what you're postulating.
yeah,
And that is quite unhealthy. And I think that then, you know, it's a bit of a downward spiral, then, isn't it?
it is, and it takes time to pull your head out of your proverbial butt, as they say, and it does feed itself. And yeah, and they're really, you know, for me, I think what happened and what came with me was a lot of self. It affected my self worth and confidence because there was an incongruency that I wasn't willing to face, and I felt that I could figure out a way to do it. For me, what it came down to is asking for help and realizing I can't do it myself. And I tried for a long time to figure it out. And when I finally really, really asked for help and let the other trees in the forest connect with me and slow down enough for that to happen, I don't know that I would be able to have done it, to be honest, for me anyway.
Well, I think, you know, if we start talking about mental health now, you know, remembering we are in 2024, you know, this could become a very big discussion.
Yes,
Because
I
I
realize
think
that.
I think in many ways insanity is a sane reaction to, you know, as I say, a world that just in many ways has become very unhinged.
Yeah, yeah. It's not an easy time to navigate, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which ties in nicely, Tony. I think we should share we were discussing before you came on.
Okay.
I believe that what would make the world a better place is that if people rename their Wi-Fi networks, because people just have a sequence of letters and numbers
Yeah.
for their Wi-Fi networks. And, you know, for instance, you could just do a short joke, you know, like Velcro, a ripoff, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, or, you know, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could walk through streets and you could look at your mobile and you'd just be smiling because you'd
Right.
be picking up people's Wi-Fi
Oh,
networks.
yeah.
And it'd be, oh, that's a good one. I hadn't heard that one. I think it's small things, you know.
Yeah. I like the way you're thinking. You know, I named we got Starlink put in here because we're quite rural, and it's News Star 2023 is that's when we put it in. So it's along those lines, but it's not quite as creative as that. I mean, maybe I need to change it.
No, it's good. It's good. No, it just, you know, people just, you know, make an effort.
Yeah.
Rename your Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah.
I challenge you all.
Yeah, or if you could just have like, you know, philosophical questions there, you know, like what is the cheapest meat you can get right now?
there is a limit to how long the network can be. The name is. I'm warning you, Tony,
I
because I
think
know you're a wordy
I'm a
person.
wordy
There's
person.
you can't fit a novel in there.
Right. Sure, you can. Just put a link.
Right. You got to hyperlink to
link.
this in order to get
Right.
the password.
Right. Well, I mean, if you just named your Wi-Fi network Y, like people would be like, why?
It's like the forgot my password that's your password.
Exactly. Continue on. Ways to make the world more amusing and peaceful.
Well, you know what we may just have here? We may just have our first call to action on tree actions where we let people share their Wi-Fi's on the Insta page.
Yeah,
Somewhere
exactly.
we create a place where everyone can share it and laugh
Oh, what a
about
claim to fame! No, let's not actually.
It was kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember, because I use all Apple or Mac products here. And when they came out before the iCloud, they had the .me accounts, and it was such a wonderful thing. Like when your account was like .me, because then you could have like a really cool email address like treeswave@me.com, and it's like it's a great way to have like. So we were just kind of proposing the same thing, that you change your Wi-Fi name to something that's clever and amusing, so that when somebody kind of picks it up errantly going down the street, like, oh, that's funny, or maybe it makes them think. That's all.
You could start a thing.
Yeah.
Like if your Wi-Fi password was Y and your neighbor's was why not, that'd be kind of funny. Why?
That'd be funny.
Why not? I don't know.
And you know what the funniest part of it is, no one would ever figure it out. Like no one would think to hack what it is. Like like your password doesn't what would be the password? It would be yeah. Especially in the stage in AI with AI. Well, I'm curious. What we may as well. What is your thoughts on AI?
I think it's hard to see where that's going, isn't it?
No.
But it's bloody scary.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. What I thought, I was reading something interesting today, which is anything coming out of AI is actually looking backwards,
Right.
because it's learning from data that's already there. Do
Right.
not expect creative solutions,
Right.
because it's building on stuff that's already there. But obviously, it's a powerful tool. I think something like vaccine research, things like that, would not be possible at the speed it's going at, that it is today. Protein folding, all that stuff. But I mean, the scope for disinformation and is terrifying, frankly, isn't it?
Yeah. What the one thing that
In a society, I'm sorry, just quickly,
yeah.
in a society that as is already struggles distinguishing real from or true from untrue.
Yeah.
You add in deep fake images, and people are just going like, "I saw it."
Yep. That the one that really freaks me out is and you're seeing it more and more is the video voiceover where it looks like the person speaking. It's their voice, but it's not quite perfected. You can usually tell that it looks a little bit like a cheap movie, but I'm sure they're going to get to the point where you won't even notice it. You won't know if it's actually real.
And this is way off topic,
Yeah.
but we had, I don't know how they call it in English, but when you have these sort of shock calls, my parents are getting on a bit, and they had somebody call them saying that I'd been involved in a hit and run, somebody had been hurt, and I was going to go to jail, and it was the police calling, and they needed, it's about money.
Yeah. Yeah.
My dad sort of twigged onto it in the end. He's like, this is a spoof, but if that person had been using my voice,
Yeah.
that's synthesized,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't, in a shock situation like that, I'll probably go for it. So, what I've said with people, with my parents now is, we need to have some kind of safe word where you just check, if the caller doesn't have the safe word, it's not me, kind of thing. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's heading in that direction for sure. And that's where, to me, it's gone, a little too far, and I don't know how that gets policed or monitored, but it's a little Wild West.
And I think it's actually, Dwayne, it's a good reason for being selective of how much video footage there is of you out there.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of an irony saying this here because we're videoing this as we speak. But, I was talking to somebody, some IT person who says, voice messages. A voice message is enough to clone your voice.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. I don't know that it's possible already at this stage.
It is, Dwayne. You can download it free off the internet.
Yeah. No, well, what I mean is to keep yourself off, like to keep yourself in a way that nobody could get it. Like it's almost impossible.
I think I think we're pretty, in a bigger picture, we're pretty small fry. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I've struggled with this too as a writer, right? One of the best ways for me to promote my work is via the internet. But now what happens is a lot of my writing is showing up on basically AI is using it to learn. So, and I tested it, right? So I get on and say, write me an article about something that, and I'm literally looking at cross-reference. Like there's literally paragraphs that I wrote, put out there. Yeah. And it bothered me for a long time. And I'm like, so I took a lot of what I had written in the past off of the online, not that that's a circus, but then I also, what it became for me in that case was a lesson in abundance versus scarcity. So I choose an abundance mindset. It's like, it's out there. If you're going to use it, you're going to use it, whatever. It's good information at that time. But I think a lot, and what I've come to learn about AI and stuff too, and where you really have to understand the filters that the AI uses, right? Because it's not smart. It doesn't pick out it couldn't pick out all the information that exists. It has to be guided by a set of filters, right? And those filters will guide it. So if you can understand what those filters are, if the people that make the AI publish those filters, and then you can select from that, I think you're far better off. So like many things technology wise, it's going to make people are going to have to be smarter about it, or it'll take advantage of them. I don't know if we're capable of doing that or not.
Well, I think we've certainly not reached the end of that development yet. I think we're, still a stretch to go.
Yeah. Well, we've, this might be, I believe it's fast approaching, if it hasn't already surpassed our longest podcast so far.
Maybe.
And I'm not complaining, but I just wanted to, draw attention to that fact. But also, I really enjoy our conversation, and
likewise.
It's been going excellently. But when we've always reserved the right, Don is quite insistent. Don Blair would like to come on the show again. Rip really enjoyed his session with us, and he'd like to visit again. And we're trying to figure out when we're going to start having our first guests repeat. We haven't yet done that, but we're maybe getting there at one of these points. And I could see this being the case with you, Mark.
Yeah. But it's pretty long because we spent quite a bit of time talking about Wi-Fi password, Wi-Fi names.
Like I often say, it's the podcast that's so disorganized it repeats.
Yeah, and I think it's the beauty of it. We've had quite a bit of feedback from people. They'll just play it on their way between jobs or driving, and the way it rolls, it can almost stop almost at any time and jump in and not really be lost.
or no more lost than we are.
Yeah, exactly. There is that. The bar is a little low. I'm sorry.
No, seriously, it's been great catching up with you guys. It's been too long. I mean, that's the flip side of not traveling. Is I miss my friends. It's obviously, bring on the portals.
Exactly, that's what we need.
Yeah. I haven't been to a TCC since before COVID, so I'm. I guess it's been long enough now. I'm holding out. DJ's won a couple PNW regionals. I figure if he wins it finally, then I'll definitely go and I'll watch my son just be a spectator. It'll be like this long enough of a hiatus. I can go there without any, and just be an observer and a dad.
Yeah, there's a lot there to be proud of, Dwayne. They're good boys.
Yeah. Me too, Mike. Children are an amazing blessing. Really, very good.
They're also bloody expensive, I've noticed.
A lot like horses, that way.
Yeah.